In early 2025, a team of geneticists working across Europe and Asia began what was supposed to be a routine update to the Global Human Genome Project, a massive international effort to refine the map of our DNA with new samples from remote populations. Their goal was simple: to fill in the final gaps in the human genetic code, using advanced sequencing technologies that could detect even the faintest variations. For months, the data streamed in without incident, thousands of sequences merging neatly into the known branches of our shared ancestry. Then, in a quiet laboratory in Zurich, something unexpected appeared. At first, it was dismissed as noise, a small cluster of nucleotide sequences that didn't seem to match any known human variant. Such errors happen often when dealing with terabytes of genetic data. But when similar fragments began showing up in other datasets, from the Pacific Islands, the Himalayas, and the dense forests of Central Africa, the tone of the discussions began to change. The fragments were nearly identical, as if they belonged to the same long-lost genome, hiding in small percentages inside modern humans. The Zurich team contacted their colleagues at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, known for their work decoding Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA. Within days, comparative analysis confirmed something extraordinary. The mysterious fragments did not belong to any known species of hominin. They weren't Neanderthal, Denisovan, or even Homo erectus. The code was other, ancient, but strangely intact, suggesting that whoever it belonged to had once interbred with early humans, leaving only faint genetic fingerprints behind. As news spread through private research channels, the reactions were divided. Some called it contamination, a laboratory artifact, a computer error, a ghost in the data. Others whispered that it might be evidence of a previously unknown branch of humanity, one that lived alongside our ancestors, but left no bones, no tools, no trace except in our blood. The genome specialists in Japan proposed an unsettling hypothesis that this lineage might have diverged from Homo sapiens over 1 million years ago, surviving in isolation before vanishing entirely. In a secure symposium held in Geneva, the findings were presented under strict confidentiality. Charts showed that between 1 and 3% of certain modern genomes, particularly in regions untouched by industrialization, contained fragments of this unknown species. The sequences appeared stable, inherited over countless generations. Yet their origin was a blank space. No fossil, no record, no match in any database on Earth. The official report avoided sensational language. It spoke of non-aligned hominin contributions and unclassified ancestral variants. But those in the room understood what it meant. Humanity's family tree was no longer a simple line of evolution. It was a web, and somewhere deep within it, a shadow branch waited to be named. Outside, the world continued unaware. In quiet labs, behind encrypted files, the story of the 2025 anomaly was beginning to unfold. The story of how a few misplaced sequences in the human genome would open one of the greatest mysteries of our time. The sequences were short, only a few hundred base pairs long, yet they refused to fit anywhere in the grand puzzle of human ancestry. To the untrained eye, they looked like random chains of A's, T's, C's, and G's. But to the geneticists studying them, they carried a haunting sense of purpose, as if these fragments were whispers from something long forgotten. Every time the data was cross-referenced against the vast genomic archives, Neanderthal, Denisovan, chimpanzee, even ancient animal DNA, the result came back the same: no match found. The mystery deepened when bioinformaticians ran a comparative algorithm designed to trace evolutionary relationships. Normally, even distant species share certain recognizable patterns, echoes of common ancestry stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. But these segments did not echo anything. They seemed to sit outside the known genetic map, like isolated islands adrift in an ocean of data. It was as if a chapter of life's story had been ripped from the book and hidden somewhere beyond reach. Dr. Aiko Tanaka, one of Japan's leading genetic anthropologists, described it best. "It's like discovering a language written in our DNA that no one on Earth speaks anymore," she told colleagues in a late-night virtual conference. Not ancient, but alien in its silence. Her words were quickly redacted from official notes, yet they circulated quietly through encrypted chats between researchers who felt both awe and unease. Further testing revealed that the fragments were not random mutations. They appeared in consistent positions along the genome, inserted with precision, passed down through generations like coded messages. In some populations, they appeared once in every 100 genomes. In others, almost none. The uneven distribution hinted at a mysterious event, a meeting between early humans and another species that had since vanished without leaving a trace of its existence in the fossil record. To rule out contamination, laboratories across 3 continents repeated the sequencing under sterile conditions. The results were identical. Even the ancient DNA extracted from Ice Age sediments in a Siberian cave carried the same spectral imprint. The evidence pointed toward a truth few dared to say aloud. This genetic material had come from an intelligent hominin unknown to science, one whose story had been completely erased by time. The fragments themselves told only fragments of a tale. Some appeared linked to immune responses, others to cognitive development or mitochondrial regulation. None were dominant, but all were quietly present, like faint brushstrokes left by an unseen artist. Evolutionary biologists speculated that this unknown ancestor might have contributed traits that shaped humanity's adaptability, a gift from a lineage long dead, living on invisibly within us. When the discovery leaked to a small circle of science journalists, they dubbed it the Forgotten Code. The name stuck. To this day, no official paper has been published under that title, yet every geneticist knows what it means. The sections of human DNA that match no known species, and which suggest that our story, the story of us, may be far older and far stranger than anyone ever imagined. The first sign didn't come from a human researcher at all. It came from an algorithm. In early 2025, as part of the final phase of the global genome update, scientists fed more than 3 million human DNA samples into a new pattern recognition system developed by the European Bioinformatics Alliance. It was called EVE3, a neural network designed to identify genetic irregularities too subtle for the human eye. Trained on billions of known sequences, it could recognize patterns in nucleotides, the way facial recognition software sees shapes in pixels. For weeks, EVE3 processed terabytes of data in silence. Then, one evening, the system paused. On its monitoring screen, a single line of code blinked red, a signal reserved for anomalies that defy classification. When researchers opened the log, they found that EVE-3 had isolated a cluster of sequences that it could not categorize within any known species, living or extinct. The algorithm labeled them non-correlating entities. At first, the Zurich team assumed it was a software glitch. They rebooted the servers, ran diagnostics, and fed the data again. The same result appeared, not once, but in several unrelated genome samples, each flagged as non-human origin with stable inheritance markers. The phrase sent a chill through the room. Machines do not exaggerate. They only compare, calculate, and conclude. To verify the finding, the team engaged an independent network of bioinformatics centers in Seoul, London, and Vancouver. Each ran their own version of EVE-3 on isolated data channels. Within hours, identical alerts began appearing across the globe. Somewhere inside human DNA, something was different, and every computer designed to read the code of life agreed that it did not belong to us. What made the anomaly even more unsettling was the pattern's consistency. It wasn't random noise or mutation. It carried symmetry, repeated motifs, and ratios that resembled the structure of functional genes, yet with base pair combinations unseen in any mammal. EVE-3's secondary model, built to trace probable evolutionary origin, produced a single, haunting output. Lineage divergence, unknown, extant 1.2 million years. In the following days, researchers fed the mysterious segments into molecular modeling software. The results were baffling. The synthetic reconstruction predicted protein structures that could theoretically function within human cells. Yet no known organism carried these blueprints. In a sense, the data described a living being that no longer existed, but whose biological signature still pulsed faintly through us. News of the non-human flag remained under embargo, known only to a few dozen geneticists worldwide. The public heard nothing, but behind the scenes, a quiet question began to echo through digital corridors and late-night conference calls. If our computers were right, and something non-human was truly written into our DNA, what exactly does that make us? When the news of the anomaly began circulating through private research networks, it did not arrive with the excitement of discovery. It arrived like a whisper, quiet, uncertain, and carrying a strange weight. Scientists who had spent their lives studying evolution, anthropology, and genetics understood the implications instantly. If these sequences truly did not belong to any known species, then every textbook and timeline of human history would need to be rewritten. But in science, caution is the first instinct, and silence the first defense. At the University of Cambridge, evolutionary biologist Dr. Elise Morand received the encrypted report at midnight. She read it twice before closing her laptop and walking home under the cold English rain. If this is real, she later told a colleague, then we're standing on the edge of something we don't yet have the language for. She wasn't alone in her hesitation. Around the world, experts responded not with celebration, but with restraint, because they had all seen how extraordinary claims can collapse under ordinary error. In Munich, the team at the Max Planck Institute scheduled an emergency review. They demanded raw data, lab logs, and contamination reports. In California, geneticists from Stanford quietly replicated the tests using preserved DNA samples collected decades earlier. The same results appeared: identical fragments, identical anomalies. Still, no one dared speak publicly. One misplaced headline could spark waves of misinformation, or worse, conspiracy theories that would undermine the credibility of decades of genomic research. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Dr. Aiko Tanaka's department at Kyoto University released a brief internal memo. It instructed researchers to withhold interpretation pending further cross-verification. That phrase, withhold interpretation, soon became a quiet mantra repeated in labs from Toronto to Tel Aviv. Even those who believed the data was genuine agreed that the world was not yet ready to hear it. After all, what would the public think if they were told that a portion of human DNA might come from a species that has never been identified? Inside the scientific community, reactions fell into three camps. The skeptics insisted it was contamination, stray microbial DNA, or algorithmic noise. The cautious accepted it as an anomaly, but doubted its significance. And then there were the few, often the younger researchers, who dared to wonder aloud, what if it's real? What if humanity's story includes a chapter we never knew was written? Weeks passed, then months. Behind closed doors, journals received drafts of papers that would never be published. Peer reviewers hesitated. Funding committees quietly declined to approve replication grants. It wasn't suppression, not exactly, but a collective decision to wait, to observe, to make sure. The scientific world, so often portrayed as fearless, had chosen discretion over revelation. And yet, beneath that restraint, a quiet fascination grew. Across continents, in whispered conversations and private Zoom calls, scientists shared the same uneasy thought. Perhaps the discovery was not a mistake at all. Perhaps the unknown species wasn't gone, only forgotten, its memory written not in fossils or bones, but in the code that builds every one of us. For more than a century, the story of humanity has been told as a straight line. From primitive ancestors to modern people, from stone tools to space travel, a clear, comforting sequence of progress. But the anomaly found in 2025 began to bend that line into a circle. If fragments of an unknown species truly live within us, then the boundary between them and us was never as clear as we thought. Evolution, it seemed, had written a far more intricate tale. In closed meetings and quiet email threads, geneticists began to sketch new possibilities. Perhaps our lineage was not a single branch, but a woven braid. Multiple streams of intelligence crossing and merging over hundreds of thousands of years. What if humanity was not born from isolation, but from connection? Some called it the mosaic hypothesis, the idea that the human genome is a living archive of vanished relatives, each contributing a verse to the song of our species. Paleoanthropologists revisited fossils with renewed attention. Skulls once dismissed as aberrations were scanned again. DNA dust was lifted from ancient sediments, long considered barren. A few early results hinted that the unknown sequences might not be evenly distributed across the world, that in some remote populations, the ghost lineage was stronger, as though its people had walked beside ours longer than history remembers. The past, suddenly, felt less like a distant place and more like a shadow standing quietly at our side. Beyond the laboratories, philosophers and historians began to take notice. The discovery blurred lines not only between species, but between myth and memory. Legends from Mesopotamia, Africa, and the Pacific spoke of those who came before, beings that taught, built, or simply vanished into the wilderness. For centuries, such stories were treated as metaphor. Now, whispered in university corridors, was the question no one wanted to voice aloud. Were the old myths remembering something real? Not everyone was ready to imagine that possibility. Many scientists urged restraint, warning that the data might still prove mundane, a genetic echo from a forgotten hominin, nothing more. Yet others saw beauty in the uncertainty. They spoke of humility, of how little we still know about the forces that shaped us. If we share even a fragment of DNA with an unknown being, one researcher wrote, then the definition of human must expand. In time, the initial excitement cooled into quiet reflection. The anomaly remained unexplained, but it had changed something fundamental. It reminded us that discovery does not always give answers. Sometimes it gives better questions. Questions about where we came from and how many others once walked this earth before the last of their kind folded into us, leaving only traces, encoded in silence, carried by every heartbeat. And so, the 2025 Genome Project closed its first chapter. The findings were archived, the files sealed, the researchers sworn to confidentiality. Yet, in the deepest part of our cells, the mystery remains, a forgotten lineage humming softly, reminding us that the story of human origins is still being written, one invisible letter at a time. Long before the 2025 anomaly was ever detected, scientists already knew that our genetic history contained ghosts. They called them ghost populations, ancient groups of humans or near humans who left no bones, no artifacts, no direct evidence of their existence, yet whose DNA lived on in us. Their presence was discovered not through fossils, but through absence. Faint signatures in genetic data that didn't match any known species. Like echoes in a canyon, they revealed something had once been there, even if the source of the sound was gone. The first ghost was found in 2010, hidden inside the genomes of people from Melanesia and Southeast Asia. Researchers were trying to confirm known Neanderthal genes when they stumbled on a set of sequences that matched neither Neanderthal nor modern human. The fragments seemed to belong to another lineage entirely, one that had interbred with our ancestors tens of thousands of years ago. It was given a name only because it had to be called something, the Denisovans, after a single finger bone found in a Siberian cave. From that one bone, an entire world was imagined, a world of beings we had never seen, yet whose blood still runs quietly in us. Over the next decade, more of these spectral fingerprints appeared. In West Africa, in the highlands of Tibet, in the islands of Indonesia, always a few % of DNA that didn't belong to any known branch. Scientists began to realize that the human family tree was not a simple trunk, but a tangle of roots buried deep beneath time. Every time a new genome was mapped, another ghost seemed to emerge, whispering that history was more crowded than we ever thought. Yet even the Denisovans had a fossil. What made the 2025 discovery different was the complete absence of one. No bone, No tool, not even a tooth fragment. The genome itself was the fossil, a digital imprint of a species that science had never touched. Some geneticists began to call it Ghost Lineage 0, the origin point of all unclassified sequences. Others preferred the term the forgotten ancestor. It sounded poetic, almost reverent, as if the unknown species were not a stranger, but a lost relative finally remembered. But not all ghosts are welcome. In anthropology, ghosts disturb neat timelines. They unsettle what was thought to be certain. To acknowledge them is to admit that human evolution is far less linear, far less human than we once believed. Yet, the data was undeniable. We carry these echoes within us, fragments of conversations written in code, whispers from others who once shared this planet, loved, fought, adapted, and vanished. And so, the story of the 2025 anomaly found its context. It was not the first ghost, but perhaps the oldest and most mysterious of all, one that stretched back beyond known prehistory, into the misty borderland where the line between human and unknown begins to fade. When scientists first sequenced Neanderthal DNA in the early 2000s, they expected to find a distant cousin, related but separate. Instead, they found family. Roughly 2% of the average modern human genome, especially in people of European and Asian descent, could be traced back to Neanderthals. It was a revelation that changed everything. Our ancestors hadn't simply replaced Neanderthals. They had met them, lived with them, and even loved them. Then came the Denisovans. From a single finger bone and a few teeth discovered in the icy Denisova cave of Siberia, researchers extracted DNA so distinct that it couldn't be categorized as Neanderthal or modern human. Another ghost had spoken. Traces of Denisovan ancestry appeared in people from Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, and parts of East Asia. It seemed that wherever humans wandered, they met other beings who were almost like them. Almost. But beneath these known encounters, something stranger was hiding. When geneticists compared Denisovan DNA to that of modern humans, they found fragments that didn't belong to either species. Within the ghost, there was another ghost, signals from a lineage even more ancient. The data suggested that Denisovans themselves might have interbred with an unknown ancestor, one that diverged from the human line over 1 million years ago. It was like opening a set of Russian nesting dolls, humans carrying Neanderthal genes, Neanderthals carrying older genes, and Denisovans holding genetic whispers from something else entirely, something that left no record except in the hidden folds of DNA. Some called this mystery ancestor hominin X, while others, less formally, called it the Elder. Whatever it was, its genetic fingerprints appeared faintly in modern people, suggesting that its essence survived, diluted, scattered, but never fully erased. The idea that we are a blend of many ancient lineages unsettled the traditional story of evolution. For decades, schoolbooks had shown a clean sequence of progress. Ape to Australopithecine, Australopithecine to human. But genetics told a different tale, one not of replacement, but of entanglement. We did not rise alone. We emerged from a long conversation between species, some known, some forgotten. Fossil evidence began to catch up. Jaw fragments found in the Tibetan plateau bore traits that seemed halfway between Denisovan and something older still. In Africa, stone tools appeared in layers where no known human species should have existed. Each discovery was like a faint footprint appearing just beyond the edge of light, leading deeper into the unknown. And so, the question sharpened. If Denisovans and Neanderthals were once called ghosts, what was this older presence, this unseen ancestor whose code still lingers in us all? The 2025 anomaly might not be new at all, some scientists whispered. Perhaps it was the final echo of the elder, the first true branch of humankind that time forgot. For every answer uncovered, two new mysteries arose. The deeper scientists looked into our DNA, the more it seemed to stare back, ancient, watchful, and waiting to be understood. For every new branch on the human family tree, there should be bones, traces left in stone and soil. Yet for this mysterious lineage, there are none. The fossil record, usually so generous with fragments and hints, has remained silent. No skull, no femur, not even a tooth bears the signature of this unknown species. It is as if the earth itself has erased every trace of their existence, leaving only the code hidden within us to tell their story. Paleoanthropologists have searched. For decades, excavations across Africa, Asia, and Europe have unearthed hundreds of remains from early humans and their cousins. Each fossil, from Lucy in Ethiopia to the Denisovan jawbone high in the Himalayas, has added a verse to the human story. But in every catalogue, every museum drawer, every carefully labelled bone shard, the same gap remains, a space where this unclassified ancestor should be. The problem is not absence of fossils, but absence of fit. Some specimens seem too primitive, others too advanced. Some carry facial features that belong to one species, while their hands or hips belong to another. These oddities have long been dismissed as individual variation or isolated mutations. But the discovery of the forgotten code in modern DNA has forced scientists to reconsider. Perhaps these strange fossils weren't mistakes after all. Perhaps they were pieces of the missing lineage that never received a name. In 2025, a re-examination of the archives at the National Museum of Kenya revealed something intriguing. A skull fragment found decades earlier in the Rift Valley, initially labelled Homo erectus. Advanced imaging suggested otherwise. The inner ear canal, the shape of the jaw, the cranial curvature, they didn't quite match erectus or habilis, nor modern humans. The DNA within the fossil was too degraded to test, but the shape alone hinted at something different, something that didn't fit any known branch. It was quietly recatalogued under unresolved hominin specimen. Similar whispers emerged elsewhere. In the limestone caves of Laos, in the dry riverbeds of northern India, and in the red soils of southern China, archaeologists found scattered bones that resisted classification. Each find was small, a piece of a jaw, a shard of skull, but together they suggested a pattern. A people without a name, scattered across continents, leaving only questions behind. Some researchers began to suspect that this lineage may have lived in regions where fossilization was rare. Humid jungles, river deltas, shifting coastlines now lost beneath rising seas. Bones left in such places would decay within centuries, erased by time and tide. If this was true, then their absence in the fossil record was not proof of non-existence. but of nature's perfect erasure. In the end, it may be our own bodies that serve as their only monuments. Every cell, every double helix, carries the faint geological memory of a species that left no bones behind, only the imprint of their being, encrypted deep within ours. Their fossils are not buried in the ground, but within the living strata of humankind itself. Every encounter between ancient human species left more than footprints. It left an exchange, a quiet sharing of survival tools written not in words, but in DNA. Long after bones turned to dust, those fragments of code remained, traveling through time, reshaping what it meant to be human. When modern scientists traced these ancient exchanges, they found that our ancestors didn't just inherit stories or tools. They inherited defenses, senses, and even emotions. Neanderthal genes, for instance, are still active in us today. Certain versions of immune system genes, particularly those related to our ability to fight off viruses and adapt to new environments, came directly from them. When early humans left Africa and moved into colder, harsher lands, it was Neanderthal DNA that helped them survive. These genes fine-tuned our skin, hair, and even our circadian rhythms, adjusting our bodies to long nights and frigid winters. Without those exchanges, many of our ancestors might never have endured the Ice Age at all. But interbreeding didn't only change the body, it changed the mind. Recent studies have shown that genes linked to neurological development, sleep cycles, and emotional regulation may also have Neanderthal or Denisovan origins. They subtly influence how our brains process stress, empathy, and even social connection. Some researchers have gone as far as to suggest that fragments from these ancient lineages might have shaped the early rise of creativity, the spark that led to art, music, and symbolic thought. We became more human in part by mingling with those who were not quite us. If Neanderthals and Denisovans shaped our resistance and cognition, then what of the unknown lineage, the one hinted at in the 2025 anomaly? Preliminary modeling suggests that the mysterious sequences might influence deep cellular repair and mitochondrial stability, particularly in brain tissue. In plain terms, they could help neurons recover from stress or injury more efficiently. It's a hypothesis still unproven, but compelling, that somewhere in our past, an unknown species gifted us resilience we didn't evolve on our own. There's a poetic symmetry to the idea. Each time our ancestors met another branch of the human tree, conflict may have followed. Competition for land, for food, for safety. Yet from those encounters came something extraordinary. Cooperation written into the fabric of life itself. Our bloodlines blended not just through violence or chance, but through the quiet persistence of evolution, finding ways to preserve what worked and carry it forward. Even today, in every heartbeat and thought, those ancient partnerships echo. The immune systems that protect us, the emotions that connect us, the dreams that guide us, all are mosaics of forgotten unions. In that sense, the discovery of the unknown DNA is not a story of division, but of reunion. It reminds us that to be human is to be plural, a living archive of every being that ever touched our line and left a trace of themselves behind. Long before we could read DNA, ancient people spoke of memory, not the kind stored in the mind, but the kind that lives in the blood. Many cultures believed that the past does not vanish, but continues quietly within us. In the modern age, science has begun to rediscover a version of that truth. Through genetics, we've learned that memory can indeed be biological, carried not as images or words, but as molecular echoes that shape how we live, think, and feel. When researchers speak of genetic memory, they don't mean literal recollections of ancestors' lives. They mean tendencies written into the genome, ways of responding to the world that were learned through survival. A sudden fear of the dark, a fascination with fire, a restlessness beneath open skies. These may all be inherited scripts from distant species who once faced dangers we can't imagine. In that sense, we do carry our extinct cousins within us, not as ghosts, but as patterns of instinct, coded resilience, and deep emotional rhythms. Epigenetic studies have shown that experiences, hunger, fear, stress, can alter the way certain genes express themselves, and those changes can be passed to future generations. It's a form of biological storytelling, where the lessons of one life can ripple quietly into the next. A famine endured by an ancestor can still affect metabolism today. A long period of isolation may have shaped the way the brain perceives safety and connection. These findings blur the line between memory and inheritance, between what we learn and what we already know. If Neanderthals taught our immune systems how to survive, and Denisovans helped shape our adaptation to altitude, then perhaps the unknown lineage, the one found in 2025, left behind something more subtle. Some neuroscientists speculate that the mysterious sequences could influence neural plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire. It's a fragile theory, but a haunting one, that deep in our genome lies a whisper of how to evolve faster, how to learn more quickly, how to remember what was once forgotten. When you think of it that way, our bodies are living museums. Every cell contains the residue of countless vanished beings, their victories, their mistakes, their dreams written in the universal language of life. We are not separate from them. We are their continuation, their unfinished story, still unfolding in time. And perhaps that is why the unknown DNA feels so strangely familiar. It doesn't announce itself as alien or foreign. It feels ancient, domestic, like something that was always meant to be there, waiting patiently to be seen. The discovery of 2025 did not give us a new species to classify. It gave us a mirror. It reminded us that the line between them and us is an illusion, that humanity is not a single thread, but a tapestry woven from many hands, many hearts, many vanished worlds that still breathe softly within our own. DNA is fragile, a delicate thread that unravels the moment life ends. Sunlight, heat, and time all conspire to erase it. And yet, somehow, fragments of genetic code have endured for tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years, hidden in bone, in ice, in grains of cave dust. Each molecule that survives does so by accident and miracle, preserved not by intention, but by circumstance. It is through these molecular fossils that science can now listen to voices long thought lost. When a living being dies, its DNA begins to decay almost immediately. The long, elegant double helix starts to break apart, splitting into shorter and shorter pieces. Within weeks, Bacteria and oxygen begin their silent work of dismantling the code. Normally, all traces are gone within centuries. But in rare cases, when cold, darkness, and dryness align perfectly, something extraordinary happens. The decay slows, almost to stillness. The body becomes a time capsule, its cells sealed by ice, salt, or sediment, waiting quietly beneath the earth for discovery. In 20ma, scientists extracted DNA from the tooth of a girl who had died over 40,000 years ago in Siberia's Denisovan cave. The air there had remained nearly unchanged for millennia, a natural refrigerator built by the planet itself. When the sequencers finally read her genome, they heard not a single voice, but a chorus, the whispers of a people who had vanished, yet still existed in fragments inside us. It was proof that life's story could survive time itself. Over the years, technology has grown more sensitive. Today, researchers can reconstruct entire genomes from a teaspoon of soil, even when no bones remain. These techniques revealed the presence of species we never knew existed, and, in 2025, helped detect the anomaly that began this story. By analyzing minute fragments preserved in ancient sediments, computers found genetic signatures with no known match, sequences too orderly to be random, yet belonging to no known life form. It was as if the Earth had stored a backup copy of a chapter we had forgotten. The endurance of DNA is, in a way, the endurance of memory. Every strand that survives 1,000 winters becomes a message in a bottle, sent by the past to whoever will one day read it. Some of those messages speak clearly: Neanderthal, Denisovan, mammoth, wolf. Others are less defined, distorted by time, broken by entropy, yet still carrying a faint rhythm that says, "I was here." And that is what makes the 2025 fragments so haunting. They should not have survived. The regions where they appeared, humid forests, volcanic plains, are places where DNA should dissolve within centuries. Yet somehow they persisted, as though protected by an unknown mechanism. Maybe luck, maybe nature's hidden genius, or maybe, just maybe, something about this lineage knew how to last. However they endured, these fragments now bridge the living and the long dead, threads of code connecting our present breath to the first sparks of consciousness that ever wondered who we are. If you were to walk into a cave where ancient humans once lived, you might see nothing but stone, dust, and silence. Yet to modern science, that dust is alive with secrets. Every breath exhaled by a creature, every drop of blood, sweat, or rain that touched the earth leaves behind microscopic fragments of DNA. Though invisible to the eye, these fragments are threads of identity, and in the right hands, they can be woven back into the stories of lives long vanished. The process is delicate. Scientists begin by collecting samples from sediment layers, thin slices of earth representing different epochs of time. Each layer holds traces of what once passed above it. A single gram of dirt might contain millions of broken DNA fragments from animals, plants, bacteria, and humans. Most are too degraded to read, but with modern sequencing technology, even the faintest molecules can be amplified, decoded, and placed on the map of life. First, the samples are taken into sterile laboratories where every surface is cleaned, every particle of modern DNA kept away. Researchers wear suits, gloves, masks, not to protect themselves, but to protect the evidence. A single stray skin cell could contaminate the entire sample. Once isolated, the soil is dissolved into solution, separating minerals from biological remains. What remains after that looks like nothing more than pale dust floating in liquid. But under the microscope, those fragments contain the entire alphabet of existence. Next comes sequencing, the act of reading. Machines the size of a briefcase can now scan billions of base pairs in a single day. They identify recurring patterns, mark anomalies, and sort them by known taxonomic families. Wolves, bears, mammoths, birds, their signatures appear like ghosts flickering in data. And sometimes, among them, something else appears. A pattern with no match. A signature that doesn't belong. That is how the Denisovans were first confirmed, from a pinch of soil taken near a bone fragment. And it is how, decades later, the 2025 anomaly emerged. Deep in layers of sediment older than any confirmed human presence, scientists detected sequences that looked unmistakably human, but weren't. They didn't fit anywhere on the family tree. No known animal, no known microbe, no contamination. Just code that spoke a familiar language in a dialect never heard before. What astonishes researchers most is how stable these genetic fragments can remain. Protected from light and heat, DNA can survive hundreds of millennia, suspended in a kind of molecular hibernation. When the right chemical process awakens it, the past returns, not as myth or imagination, but as measurable data. It is, in many ways, resurrection through science. Every sequence read from ancient dust is a form of archaeology too small for the eye to see, but vast enough to rewrite our understanding of life. Through this fragile art, we've learned that the earth remembers more than we think. Even when bones crumble and names are lost, the soil still whispers, softly, the truth of who once walked upon it. Across the face of the earth, there are certain places where time seems to move differently. Places where the wind still carries traces of those who came long before us. For scientists searching for the origins of humanity, 3 such places have become almost sacred: the frozen caves of Siberia, the thin air of the Tibetan Plateau, and the sunlit islands scattered across the South Pacific. Each has yielded fragments of a story that is still being written, a story that may hold the key to the unknown DNA hidden within us. It began, as many revelations do, in Siberia. The Denisova cave, cold and silent, had already revealed the existence of a people once thought imaginary. For years, new samples continued to emerge: teeth, bones, even dust, each containing fragments of DNA that blurred the boundary between human and something older. But then, deep within the lowest sediment layers, researchers found something stranger still: genetic material that looked almost human, yet not Neanderthal, not Denisovan, not modern. Its pattern was older, its code less refined, as though evolution had paused halfway, leaving behind an unfinished prototype of what we would one day become. From Siberia, the trail of mystery wound southward to the highlands of Tibet. There, among the mountain passes carved by glaciers, another discovery emerged. A jawbone, weathered by cold and time, found in a cave more than 3,000 meters above sea level. Its owner had lived nearly 160,000 years ago, long before Homo sapiens ever set foot in the region. When scientists extracted DNA from its interior, they found markers similar to those of Denisovans, but not identical. Something about the sequence felt unfamiliar, almost transitional. Some fragments matched no known species, mirroring those same sequences flagged by computers in 2025. The implications were extraordinary. Whoever these beings were, they could survive in thin air where oxygen was scarce, a genetic adaptation later found in the bloodlines of modern Tibetans. Even now, our cells carry their legacy, genes that help us breathe where the air itself seems to disappear. The unknown ancestors may have passed through these mountains, leaving not footprints, but endurance. Far to the east, the trail reached the Pacific. In the islands of Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Chain, and Fiji, geneticists found traces of ancient DNA older than any known migration. Entire populations carried fragments that could not be traced to Africa, Europe, or Asia. These genetic echoes seem to come from a lineage that branched off early, perhaps before any of the others. Some anthropologists proposed that the unknown species might have journeyed here first, spreading quietly across the ancient world, their remains long since swallowed by rising seas. Each discovery, Siberia, Tibet, the Pacific, added a thread to the same woven mystery, a pattern repeating across continents and time. It suggested that the unknown species was not confined to one place or age. They walked the same earth we do, saw the same stars, and somehow became a part of us, not through fossils, but through blood. And so, what began in one frozen cave has expanded into a global riddle. Wherever we search, from the coldest mountains to the warmest seas, the same quiet voice in our DNA seems to whisper, "We were here too." If our DNA is a library of life, then mitochondria are its oldest librarians. Tiny powerhouses inside every cell, they have their own genetic code, a thread passed down only through the maternal line, from mother to child, across unbroken generations, reaching back hundreds of thousands of years. This maternal DNA is one of the most powerful tools for tracing ancestry. It tells the story not just of humanity, but of the women who carried life through the ages. Yet, in 2025, when scientists compared these mitochondrial sequences to known human lineages, something unexpected appeared. A maternal echo that didn't belong anywhere on the family tree. Normally, mitochondrial DNA aligns neatly with one of several known haplogroups, branches that represent different migrations and populations. But in a small percentage of samples collected during the Global Genome Project, the alignment failed. The computer models flagged a recurring pattern, similar to modern human mitochondria, but subtly different, an altered rhythm, a rearranged phrase in the genetic language. It was as if a long-lost dialect of the human genome had been rediscovered. At first, the differences seemed minor, a few base pairs substituted here, an inversion there. But when biologists ran evolutionary timelines, the divergence point appeared impossibly ancient, far older than Neanderthals, older than Denisovans, older even than the earliest known humans in Africa. By conservative estimates, this mysterious maternal line could have split from ours over 1 million years ago. And yet, traces of it still lingered in modern people, passed quietly from mother to child for millennia. The discovery sent ripples through the scientific community. Some suggested the sequences might belong to an unknown species of early human, one that interbred with our ancestors and vanished without a trace. Others theorized an even stranger possibility that the mitochondria themselves might have been transferred through viral or bacterial intermediaries, preserved by sheer chance in isolated human populations. But neither explanation accounted for the stability of the code. It didn't look like contamination. It looked inherited. In one unpublished study, researchers compared mitochondrial samples from high-altitude populations in Tibet, the Pacific Islands, and equatorial Africa. Despite vast geographic separation, a faintly similar signature appeared in all three, subtle but unmistakable. The same forgotten rhythm repeating in the cells of people who had never met, separated by oceans and eras. That rhythm seemed to hum beneath the surface, quiet but persistent, like a melody too old to remember the lyrics to. For the scientists who uncovered it, the realization was humbling. Every human being alive today carries a record of unbroken motherhood stretching back to the dawn of our kind. But perhaps, intertwined within it, lies another lineage, one that watched us rise, merged with us, and then faded into memory. Its final trace may live on, not in the ground, but in the mitochondria, the oldest storytellers in the cell, whispering of mothers who were human and mothers who were something else. In every genome, there are passages that never speak. Scientists call them non-coding regions, stretches of DNA that do not seem to build anything, yet persist through time with stubborn consistency. They are the quiet pages of life's book, copied again and again through billions of births. For decades, they were dismissed as genetic noise, the leftovers of evolution. But as our ability to read the code improved, it became clear that silence does not mean emptiness. Many of these fragments guide when and how other genes awaken, like hidden conductors orchestrating a symphony we barely hear. When the unknown sequences first appeared in 2025, most of them lay within those silent regions. They did not code for proteins. They did not carry instructions. They simply existed, unchanged, untouched, inexplicably conserved across thousands of generations. To biologists, that endurance itself was a message. Nature discards what it does not need. If these fragments survived for 1 million years, it was because they mattered, even if we do not yet understand why. Some theorists believe the fragments may serve as stabilizers, anchors that keep our chromosomes intact under stress. Others suspect they regulate cell repair, or even influence aging by guiding how DNA folds within its microscopic spirals. A few have proposed more poetic ideas, that these sequences act as molecular memory, a way the genome recalls ancient solutions to survival challenges, ready to be reactivated if the world changes again. In that sense, evolution might not just move forward, it might occasionally look backward, retrieving wisdom from long-lost relatives still sleeping within us. But the most haunting possibility is the simplest one, that these fragments are messages left behind. Not in the conscious sense, but as natural inscriptions of being, signatures of a species that refused to vanish completely. Just as fossils capture the shape of a bone, these molecular fossils capture the rhythm of a life. Each base pair, each fragment, is a syllable in an ancient language we are only beginning to decode. When researchers fed the unknown sequences into pattern recognition algorithms, they noticed something unexpected. Certain motifs repeated at intervals that mirrored the spacing of known human developmental genes, almost as if they were once part of a greater whole, a shared blueprint fractured by time. The computers couldn't say what the patterns meant, but when visualized, they resembled waves, rising and falling, repeating like breath. Perhaps that is all the silent fragments are, the breath of an earlier humanity, still pulsing faintly in ours. They do not shout. They do not demand understanding. They simply remind us that we are not the first to wonder, to build, to dream, that somewhere, long before names or nations, another kind of human stood beneath the same stars, leaving a trace not in monuments of stone, but in the living architecture of our cells. And if we listen closely enough, not with the ear, but with imagination, we might still hear what those fragments have been trying to tell us all along, that life never truly forgets itself. Long before microscopes and gene sequencers, people looked to the stars, to rivers, and to dreams to explain where they came from. In the ancient cities of Mesopotamia and the sacred valleys of India, the story of humanity was told not as a straight line of progress, but as a cycle, one creation giving way to another, each age shaped by different beings. These myths spoke softly of times before us, when the earth was ruled by creatures almost human, yet not quite. Their faces appear in carvings, their names half forgotten, their meaning blurred by the centuries. But as modern scientists study the hidden branches of our genetic past, those ancient tales have begun to sound strangely familiar. In Sumer, cradle of civilization, clay tablets describe the Anunnaki, divine figures said to have descended from the heavens to shape early humanity. They were wise, powerful, and unlike any living people. Some stories say they mingled with mortals, teaching language, agriculture, and law. Others describe them as caretakers of creation before the first true humans appeared. For centuries, scholars viewed these as symbolic, metaphors for kings or natural forces. Yet, in light of modern genetics, the idea of an older, vanished lineage that once coexisted with humans feels less like fantasy and more like memory distorted by myth. Far to the east, in India's ancient Vedic texts, similar echoes appear. The Rig Veda speaks of the Asuras, beings of great knowledge and strength who existed before the age of man. They were not gods, nor demons, but something in between, older intelligences whose light eventually faded. In later Hindu tradition, the Asuras became antagonists, but the earliest verses describe them as teachers and builders, creators of worlds, and guardians of the hidden sciences. It's a story that mirrors the human condition, of something ancient passing its fire to the next generation before stepping into shadow. Both civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and cultures, tell of a time when creation itself was layered, when multiple races or forms of consciousness shared the earth. Perhaps They were never meant to be literal, but perhaps they preserved, in poetic form, a truth once witnessed and long forgotten, that humanity was not born alone, but inherited a world already inhabited by others. Archaeologists often say myth is memory, wearing the costume of imagination. The flood stories, the sky gods, the golden ages, all may be echoes of real transitions, times when the earth changed hands from one species to another. When we read these ancient tales beside our own DNA, it's hard not to sense the resonance between them. The Sumerians spoke of creators mixing the essence of life. Today, we speak of genomes merging through interbreeding. The language has changed, but the story of us and them, may be older than civilization itself. And as the genetic evidence unfolds, these ancient voices from Mesopotamia and India whisper across the millennia, asking the same question the 2025 scientists asked in their sterile laboratories: who truly came before us, and how much of them still remains within? In the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, beneath layers of dust and time, archaeologists unearthed clay tablets that carried the oldest written words known to humankind. Pressed into wet clay, with a reed stylus, the cuneiform signs spoke of kings and floods, gods and stars. But among them were passages that told a quieter, stranger story. The Sumerians believed life itself had been shaped with intention, molded not by chance, but by design. They spoke of living beings created by the gods, not as metaphor, but as literal craftsmanship, the deliberate forming of life from clay, blood, and divine breath. In one of the oldest myths, the Epic of Atrahasis, the gods, weary from laboring over the creation of the world, sought to make a race that would serve them. The mother goddess Nintu, sometimes called Mami, was said to have mixed clay with the blood of a slain deity to form the first humans. She whispered sacred words over the mixture, and from it arose a being who could think, speak, and build. The clay had life, the tablets say, and the spirit was given form. For centuries, scholars interpreted this as simple mythology, a symbolic birth of humanity's consciousness. But in the light of what genetic science has revealed, the image takes on a new resonance. A people created from mixtures, clay, and divine blood, echoes curiously with our understanding of mixed ancestry, the merging of distinct species, the exchange of DNA that gave rise to modern humans. The Sumerians, through myth, may have intuited what science would prove thousands of years later, that our origins were not singular, but hybrid. Other tablets expand on this idea. The Enki and Ninmah myth describes gods experimenting with creation, forming beings who were incomplete, flawed, or different. Some could not see, others could not stand. The story carries both humor and compassion, portraying creation as a process of trial and error, guided by curiosity rather than perfection. Ninmah blesses each imperfect form, declaring that even weakness has purpose. In modern genetics, we hear the same lesson, that mutation and variation, the so-called flaws, are the very engines of evolution. What makes the Sumerian myths remarkable is not just their content, but their tone. They treat the making of life as both sacred and technical. The gods, use precise ingredients, follow steps, test results. It reads, at times, less like religion and more like an early scientific allegory. If one listens closely, the language of clay and breath begins to sound like the language of cells and code, as if these ancient storytellers glimpsed, in dream or intuition, the great secret that matter itself could be shaped into life. Perhaps the Sumerians were not describing divine laboratories, but remembering something far older, encounters with beings who seemed to craft rather than merely live. Or perhaps the myth is humanity's own reflection, our earliest recognition that within us lies the same creative power once attributed to gods. In the end, their message endures. Life was not born by accident, they said. It was made, shaped by hands we no longer remember. Through mixtures we are only beginning to understand. And somewhere within the double helix of our DNA, that ancient act of creation still echoes. The breath of gods and the dust of the earth, fused into the living pattern we call human. Across the deserts of Australia and the scattered islands of the Pacific, stories were told long before the first alphabet was carved into stone. They were sung beneath starlit skies, whispered around fires, passed through countless generations without ever being written. To Western ears, they were myths, but to those who kept them, they were history. Many of these stories speak of beings who came before the first people, the tall ones, figures half human, half something else, who walked the earth when the world was young. Among the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, ancient songlines describe ancestral spirits who rose from the earth and shaped the landscape. Yet scattered within those verses are references to strangers, sky beings or first teachers, who stood taller than any man, with long limbs and pale eyes that reflected the moonlight. They were said to have shown early humans how to find water, how to paint, how to listen to the wind. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. The elders say they returned to the stone. For thousands of years, their memory survived in ochre paintings, hidden in remote caves. Tall, thin silhouettes with round heads and no mouths, their hands pressed flat against the walls, as if leaving a farewell. Far across the ocean, in the islands of Polynesia, similar memories appear beneath different names. In Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa, legends tell of the Loa, the giant ancestors, who built the first stone platforms and guided the migration of canoes. The Maori of Aotearoa speak of the Tupua, tall and fair-skinned spirits who dwelled in the forests before the arrival of humankind. Their footprints, it was said, could still be found in the volcanic ash after certain storms. And on Easter Island, Rapa Nui, the Moai statues, with their elongated faces and solemn expressions, are sometimes said to represent the Long-Ears, an earlier race who taught the art of stoneworking before vanishing into the sea. For centuries, these were treated as folklore, echoes of imagination. But when modern geneticists studied isolated Pacific populations, they found traces of ancestry that did not align neatly with any known migration from Asia or Africa. Tiny fragments, less than 1%, pointed toward an unidentified lineage, one older than expected, one that perhaps once moved among these very islands. Coincidence, perhaps, or maybe memory carried through blood as well as story. Anthropologists now believe that oral traditions, though poetic, often preserve real historical impressions. Volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, lost lands, vanished peoples. The tall ones, may have been encounters with early human groups, now extinct, who migrated long before recorded history. Or they may be something even deeper, a symbolic remembrance of the otherness that once shared the world with us. When the wind moves through the red deserts of Australia or across the reefs of Polynesia, the old songs still rise. They speak softly of teachers who came and went, of creators who left no bones behind, only stories and the faintest traces in DNA. And perhaps, as we uncover more of our hidden genome, we are at last beginning to remember them, the tall ones who taught, walked, and disappeared into the silence from which we all began. Stone remembers what flesh forgets. Across deserts, jungles, and mountain plateaus, humanity has always carved its memories into rock, the most enduring canvas we know. Long after languages fade and empires vanish, the faces carved in stone still look back at us, silent and patient. And sometimes those faces do not look entirely human. In the highlands of Peru, at a site called Huaca Prieta, archaeologists uncovered carvings older than any temple in the Americas. Among the spirals and animal figures were depictions of beings with elongated skulls and large, almond-shaped eyes. Faces that seemed out of place beside the figures of hunters and shamans. Locals called them Los Antiguos, the Ancient Ones. Similar shapes appear thousands of miles away on the sandstone walls of Australia's Kimberley region. There, the Wandjina spirits are painted tall and white, with round heads and no mouths. They stare outward with calm, knowing eyes, their forms haloed by what looks like radiance or air. Anthropologists have long debated these motifs. Some argue they represent gods or ancestors. Others see stylized depictions of early humans wearing ritual masks. Yet, when viewed through the quiet lens of modern genetics, another interpretation begins to form. If the human past truly includes contact, not in the modern sense of alien, but of other, with lost hominin species, then perhaps ancient artists recorded what they saw, faces different from theirs, yet close enough to recognize. In Mesopotamia, Sumerian reliefs show figures with smooth skulls, large eyes, and long fingers. The same proportions echoed later in Egyptian and pre-Olmec art. In India's Indus Valley seals, mysterious horned beings and hybrid shapes stand beside humans, their identities unknown. Some scholars interpret them as gods, others as metaphors for transformation. But there's another possibility, that early humans were trying to capture the memory of those who came before, beings that looked familiar yet foreign, the last remnants of a species we've since lost. Throughout history, each culture seems to have inherited the same instinct, to carve what it fears to forget. These faces in stone are not uniform, but they share one strange trait, an expression of quiet watchfulness. They do not smile nor frown. They simply observe, as though they know something. The carver did not. Perhaps that is why so many ancient sites were later treated as sacred ground. The people who followed may not have understood who these figures were, but they felt their weight, the presence of an age older than their own. Modern imaging has revealed faint pigment traces on some of these carvings, showing that the eyes were once painted bright, reflecting light even in darkness. It gives the eerie impression that the watchers never truly slept. Maybe these carvings are no more than imagination, or maybe they are a memory fossilized in art, a record left not by science, but by awe. If our DNA holds the voice of forgotten ancestors, perhaps these stones hold their faces, staring across time, asking only to be remembered. For centuries, myth and science were seen as opposites, one the realm of imagination, the other of evidence. Yet the deeper we look into the past, the more those two worlds begin to touch. Myths, it seems, are not simply stories made to entertain or explain. They are vessels, containers of memory, coded in symbol and rhythm, passed down through generations, long before writing or data could exist. When we listen carefully, these old tales begin to sound less like inventions and more like recollections. Faint recollections of events too ancient to recall consciously, but too important for the species to forget. Take, for example, the flood myths that appear in cultures across the globe: Sumer, India, Greece, China, the Americas. Each tells of a time when the world was nearly erased, when an older civilization or species vanished beneath the waters. To the archaeologist, this may reflect memories of real sea level rises at the end of the last ice age. But to the geneticist, it mirrors something subtler: the evolutionary bottlenecks, the near extinctions through which humanity barely passed. We survived, but not unchanged. In both science and story, a few remained to rebuild the world. Similarly, the myths of first beings, the Anunnaki, the Asuras, the Tall Ones, the Watchers, describe creatures that resemble us but stand apart, older, stronger, wiser, sometimes compassionate, sometimes cruel. Perhaps these were simply projections of human longing. Or perhaps, beneath the poetry, they were echoes of real encounters, meetings between early humans and other hominins now lost to time. When two species of consciousness share the same world, stories become the bridge between them. What begins as memory slowly transforms into myth. Modern neuroscience adds another layer to the mystery. Human memory, especially across generations, is not only biological, it's narrative. We remember through repetition, through song, through story. Cultures that survived did so by encoding truth within tales that could outlive the body. A warning about a flood becomes a parable. A memory of a vanished people becomes a legend. Even genetic memory, the inherited patterns of fear, intuition, and instinct, finds its mirror in the myths of ancient trauma and divine inheritance. In this way, mythology is evolution's second archive, the mind's version of DNA. When the 2025 Genome Project uncovered sequences with no known origin, it challenged science to accept what myth had always whispered, that our past is not as solitary as we imagined. The stories of creation, descent, and union may not describe gods in the sky, but ancestors who walked beside us, and whose traces still flow in our veins. Myth may be memory speaking the only language it knows. In the end, mythology and genetics are not enemies, but reflections, one written in symbols, the other in code. Both preserve what we were too fragile to hold consciously. Both remind us that the human story began long before history, in a place where science and dream were still the same thing. and where the truth of our origins was sung, not studied. In science, every discovery begins with disbelief. Doubt is the discipline's oldest instinct, the invisible gatekeeper that protects knowledge from imagination. When the 2025 Genome Project announced that fragments of human DNA did not match any known species, the academic world reacted exactly as expected. With silence first, then skepticism, and finally, with the slow machinery of verification. To the researchers who had uncovered the anomaly, it felt like standing on the edge of a revelation. But to their peers, it looked like a familiar mirage, the kind that appears when data is pushed to its limits. Errors in sequencing, contamination, statistical illusion. The explanations arrived before the evidence had even been read. After all, history is filled with discoveries that later dissolved under scrutiny. It was safer, some argued, to assume mistake before miracle. At Harvard, one geneticist compared the findings to seeing faces in clouds. Patterns appear everywhere when you look long enough. Another called it data archaeology, the act of digging so deeply into code that you eventually unearth ghosts of your own software. Even those open to the idea urged restraint. They reminded colleagues of Piltdown Man, the early 20th century fossil hoax that fooled scientists for decades. Extraordinary claims, they said, require extraordinary evidence. Behind closed doors, conferences buzzed with careful phrases: unverified sequence, non-aligned variant, artifact of computation. To the public, there was nothing to see. The results were buried under peer review, delayed for more testing, smoothed into the dull language of technical reports. It wasn't conspiracy, it was caution. Academia, after all, is not built to chase wonder. It is built to confirm it beyond all doubt. And yet, beneath the skepticism, curiosity persisted. A few researchers, younger, less tethered by reputation, began to compare notes. They noticed that even when samples were taken in separate countries, by different teams using independent machines, the same pattern appeared. The sequences didn't vanish when protocols changed. They stayed, like a watermark in the genome itself. That quiet consistency unsettled the skeptics. It's one thing to dismiss a single anomaly, another to explain identical anomalies appearing across continents. A quiet divide grew within the field. On one side stood those who demanded irrefutable proof, a fossil, a preserved bone, something tangible. On the other stood those who believed the proof was already inside us, coded in the living. Both sides, in their own way, were right. Science needed evidence. But evidence, as the past has shown, sometimes takes centuries to surface. In time, even the doubters began to admit that something unusual was there, though they preferred safer words. An unclassified variant, a genetic remainder. What they would not say was unknown species. That phrase belonged to myth, not science. And yet, quietly, a few began to wonder if myth and science had once again met in the middle. Because if doubt is the beginning of knowledge, then perhaps skepticism was not a wall, but a doorway, one leading, however reluctantly, toward the truth of who we really are. When something new appears in the data, something that doesn't belong, the first rule of genetics is simple. Assume contamination. A stray cell, a microscopic fragment of dust, even the breath of a researcher can introduce foreign DNA into a sample. It happens quietly, invisibly, and it can trick the most advanced machines into reading fiction as fact. The laboratories that discovered the 2025 anomaly knew this all too well. Before they could suggest a new species, they had to rule out the oldest culprit in science: human error. The checks began immediately. Every tube, every pipette, every microchip used in the sequencing process was sterilized and tested. The results were the same. The strange genetic signatures appeared again and again, not just in one lab, but in several, separated by oceans. The odds of identical contamination occurring in multiple countries under different conditions were astronomically small. Yet that was the explanation many scientists preferred. It was easier, safer, to believe in error than in an unknown chapter of evolution. In Zurich, a technician recalled running a blank control, a test with no DNA at all, to ensure that the machines were clean. The computer returned nothing as expected. But when the sample from the Pacific Islands was loaded moments later, the anomaly reappeared. The sequences materialized in precisely the same pattern as before, like a signature written by an invisible hand. He ran it again and again. The same result, unchanging. Meanwhile, at the Max Planck Institute, geneticists performed a different kind of test. They fed the anomalous sequences into an algorithm designed to detect laboratory contaminants, bacteria, fungi, or viral DNA common to human environments. The system returned no match. Whatever this was, it wasn't modern, and it wasn't from the lab. Its structure was too orderly, too deeply nested within the human genome to be accidental. Even so, the skeptics persisted. Perhaps, they argued, the anomaly came from an extinct animal, a primate whose DNA had somehow mixed with ancient human remains. But once again, the data refused to comply. The sequences weren't random intrusions. They appeared in consistent positions along human chromosomes, inherited like any other gene. Contamination doesn't replicate that way. It doesn't follow Mendel's laws. At one point, researchers in Japan froze an entire batch of samples and transported them under sealed, temperature-controlled conditions to a second facility across the world. When tested months later, the same mysterious code emerged, unchanged, unfaded. It seemed to survive not only time, but scrutiny. In the end, the evidence painted a strange picture. If it was contamination, it was the most persistent, widespread, and precise form ever recorded. One that somehow obeyed inheritance patterns and avoided all known databases. If it wasn't contamination, then science stood face to face with something far more extraordinary, a genuine trace of a being we've never found. For now, the question remains suspended, balanced between skepticism and wonder. But every test that fails to erase the anomaly brings us closer to an uncomfortable possibility that the contamination isn't in the data at all. It's in our assumption that we already know the limits of what it means to be human. When the strange sequences refused to disappear, researchers turned to something new, machines that could imagine what time had erased. Artificial intelligence had already learned to rebuild lost languages, to colorize ancient photographs, to finish fragments of forgotten songs. Now, the same principle was being applied to biology. If a genome is a story written in code, then perhaps a machine could read its incomplete sentences and guess what words once filled the gaps. The Zurich team fed the data into an experimental system called EVE-4, the next generation of the neural network that had first flagged the anomaly. EVE-4 was different. It didn't just compare sequences, it predicted them. Trained on millions of known genomes, it could reconstruct ancestral DNA from fragments, estimating how genes might have looked before evolution rewrote them. The goal was not to create life, but to restore a picture of what once was. For weeks, the program ran in near silence, cross-referencing every fragment of the mysterious code against known species: human, primate, mammal, even bacterial. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The machine filled in the missing sequences, building not a single gene, but a network of them, interconnected, organized, purposeful. What startled the researchers most was how coherent it looked. Random noise does not build symmetry. Contamination does not produce working blueprints. Yet, the reconstruction revealed something that seemed to obey the laws of biology. At the heart of the digital genome was a cluster of regulatory genes, switches that control when and how other genes are activated. In humans, similar clusters guide brain development and immune function. But here, the arrangement was subtly different, optimized in ways evolution had never taken. When EVE-4 modeled the potential proteins, they appeared stable, efficient, even elegant. One geneticist whispered that it looked as if someone had refined the design. Caution ruled the room. The scientists reminded themselves that AI does not uncover truth. It predicts patterns. The reconstruction was a mathematical possibility, not proof, and yet it matched the data too perfectly to dismiss. To test the system, they fed it randomized noise disguised as DNA. The algorithm rejected it immediately. Then they fed it verified Neanderthal code. The reconstruction aligned flawlessly. Finally, they returned to the anomaly, and once more, EVE-4 produced the same mysterious structure, identical to its earlier prediction. Other labs repeated the experiment independently, using their own AI tools. The outcome was always the same. Whatever this genome belonged to, it was consistent. The digital shadow of an organism that might once have lived. The models suggested a being with strong cellular resilience, exceptional oxygen efficiency, and enhanced neural plasticity, traits that sounded almost human, and yet not. No one could say for certain what they were seeing. A simulation, a reflection of bias in the machine, or the ghost of an organism whose DNA we still carry in pieces. The reports concluded with measured words. Preliminary reconstruction suggests a coherent ancestral genome of unknown origin. But outside the formal language of academia, the whispers returned. The AI, it seemed, had drawn the face of something that evolution remembered, and that we had almost forgotten. For a long time, science kept its secrets in the open. New findings were shared in bright conference halls and glossy journals, debated publicly until certainty emerged. But the 2025 anomaly brought a different kind of silence. Not censorship, but caution. What began as a technical irregularity soon became a question no one wished to ask too loudly. If the human genome truly carries fragments of an unknown species, what does that mean for our definition of human? At first, the debate flickered quietly through peer review platforms. short technical notes appeared with careful phrasing. Unclassified variants, anomalous sequence clusters, unresolved alignment artifacts. Between the lines, those who could read the data understood what was being discussed. Reviewers were cautious. Editors demanded additional controls, new replications, stricter wording, and, yet, submission after submission carried the same patterns, the same whispers beneath the academic calm. In late 2026, a small genetics journal based in Norway published a brief correspondence titled Non-Human Paralogs in Isolated Human Haplotypes. It drew little public attention, but among experts, it landed like a spark. The authors did not claim discovery. They simply presented statistical evidence of genetic material that could not be traced to any known species. Within weeks, the paper was quietly withdrawn, officially for data verification, though no one could point to an error. Those who cited it later described a polite phone call from reviewers, suggesting that perhaps it was best left unconfirmed. Other papers followed. Some stayed online for a few days. Some never left the submission queue. The arguments were always the same. Was it real, or the echo of an algorithm misreading noise? The answers were always inconclusive. But privately, many scientists admitted the pattern's persistence was unsettling. When the same irregularities appeared in independent datasets, the coincidence became harder to ignore. At conferences, the topic was rarely listed on official agendas. Yet, late at night, in hotel lobbies and dim conference bars, it surfaced again. Researchers compared graphs on tablets, lowering their voices as if discussing something forbidden. "Have you seen it in your samples?" one would ask. "Yes," another would reply, "but we can't talk about it." In those unrecorded conversations, the real science continued, hesitant, honest, unguarded. Funding agencies avoided the subject entirely. No one wanted to be the first to back a study that might rewrite anthropology. The debate became a ghost itself, living in footnotes, whispers, and data repositories hidden behind access codes. Even journalists who caught fragments of the story found no one willing to speak on record. There were no villains, no cover-ups, only a collective unease at standing too close to a mystery that threatened to blur the boundaries of certainty. Still, the work went on quietly. In small labs, graduate students and postdocs kept analyzing, comparing, searching. And while the world slept, the journals filled with silence, empty spaces where words should have been, spaces that said more than any headline ever could. Because sometimes, what science fears most is not being wrong. It's being right too soon. In every age, humanity has believed its understanding of life was nearly complete. Darwin's theory of evolution once shattered the boundaries of faith and reason, replacing divine creation with natural selection. Then, genetics rewrote evolution again, showing that inheritance was written in code. Chemical letters that could be read, copied, and changed. Now, more than a century later, a few quiet scientists wonder if another turning point has come. One that does not erase what Darwin discovered, but expands it, a version of evolution that includes memory, merging, and perhaps intention. If the 2025 anomaly is real, if fragments of an unknown species truly live within our DNA, then the story of human origins is not a simple tree branching upward, but a web a tapestry woven from many kinds of minds. We are not the end of evolution's experiment, but its continuation. Our genes tell a story of meetings rather than replacements, of dialogue rather than dominance. And in that realization lies something both humbling and profound. Across the scientific community, reactions remain measured. Some call it the beginning of Paleogenomics 2.0, an era where data can reveal lost chapters of evolution without a single fossil. Others resist the idea entirely, insisting that biology must remain bound by what can be touched, not merely inferred. But quietly, more and more researchers admit that the evidence, scattered, persistent, undeniable, suggests a hidden lineage still woven into us. Not alien, not divine, but forgotten. The implications stretch far beyond anthropology. If our genome truly holds preserved fragments of other beings, it suggests that evolution does not fully erase. It remembers. It integrates. In that sense, life is not a ladder climbing toward perfection, but a circle, one that gathers and carries forward everything that has ever lived. Each generation is both the inheritor and the archivist of existence. There is beauty in that idea. It means that extinction, though final in bone, may not be final in essence. That a species may vanish from the surface of the earth, but survive quietly in our cells, in our instincts, in the hidden corridors of DNA. It means that memory itself, biological memory, is one of evolution's greatest tools. Still, the question remains, who were they? The beings whose signatures persist in our blood? The ones whose mitochondrial echoes hum beneath our heartbeat? Perhaps one day, a fossil will emerge that matches the code exactly. A jawbone, a tooth, a single strand of hair. Or perhaps we will never find them, and their only memorial will be the faint data that links us together. If so, then evolution's story is not one of separation, but reunion. It tells us that we are the sum of all life that came before, that the line between ancestor and descendant, human and unknown, is thinner than we ever imagined. And maybe that is what science is truly standing on the edge of. Not the end of knowledge, but the beginning of understanding. That the greatest mystery of evolution is that it never forgot us, and we have only just begun to remember it. Every story of human evolution once began with two names, Neanderthal and Denisovan, our known cousins, extinct but remembered in our DNA. But as genetic maps grew more detailed, a third presence began to appear between them, like a faint shadow connecting lines that should never have crossed. The data did not name it, yet it was there, an unseen ancestor that shared its blood with both, and through them, with us. Scientists began to call it simply the third ancestor. The hypothesis first took shape in 2027, building on the fragments uncovered by the 2025 genome anomaly. The reasoning was simple. If Neanderthals and Denisovans each carried genes from an older, unknown lineage, and those same fragments appeared in modern humans, then all three species must have shared a common, hidden source. Somewhere deep in prehistory, before the first stone tools of Africa and the first footprints in Asia, there must have existed another branch of humanity. One older, more adaptive, perhaps more widespread than any we have yet found. Early modelling placed this being over 1 million years in the past, living alongside Homo erectus, perhaps even interbreeding with it. It might have roamed across Eurasia long before glaciers shaped the world we know. Unlike the others, it left no skulls in caves, no carvings, no tools, only faint messages in DNA. Some researchers suggested it had learned to survive in ways we no longer understand, retreating into remote regions, blending with those who came after. Others argued that it simply disappeared, its physical traces erased by time, but its code absorbed into the genomes of its descendants. What makes the third ancestor so compelling is not only the genetics, but the pattern of distribution. The unknown sequences appear everywhere, in Siberia, in Melanesia, in Central Africa, and even faintly in Europe. No other lineage has such reach. It's as if this ancestor walked the entire map of the ancient world, touching each people before fading away. And unlike the Neanderthals or Denisovans, whose features we can imagine, the third ancestor remains faceless. It exists only as an algorithmic ghost, a statistical shape carved out of absence. The discovery has forced scientists to reconsider what human truly means. If our ancestry includes an unknown branch, then our story is not one of singular origin, but of gathering. Every person alive today is a living mosaic, a convergence of countless histories, most of them forgotten. The third ancestor is less a separate being than a reminder that evolution never moves cleanly forward. It loops, it overlaps, it merges, carrying fragments of the old into the new. And perhaps that is why its traces still persist. The third ancestor may have vanished in body, but not in essence. It exists in every breath, every heartbeat, every strand of DNA that links us back to a time before human had a single definition. We do not remember it by name, but perhaps, deep within our cells, the third ancestor remembers us, quietly, patiently, as if waiting for the moment when its story will finally. For most of human history, we imagined ourselves alone, a species apart, set above the rest by reason and awareness. But the more we study our past, the more that solitude unravels. The Earth, it seems, was once home to many kinds of humans. Some were taller, some smaller, some stronger, some delicate and precise. And between them all, there were meetings. Moments when one kind looked into the eyes of another and saw something familiar. From those encounters came hybrids, children of two worlds, bridges between species now gone. Fossil evidence has already confirmed that hybridization was not rare. A single bone fragment from the Denisovan cave belonged to a girl whose mother was Neanderthal and father Denisovan, proof that the borders between species were softer than we once believed. Other remains suggest similar unions scattered across time and geography. Hybridization, far from being an anomaly, may have been the engine that carried humanity forward, a quiet exchange of strengths written directly into blood. If Neanderthals and Denisovans could merge, why not others? The 2025 anomaly suggests there was at least one more branch, perhaps more, that mingled with our ancestors. Some genetic models predict that these hidden hybrids might have been vital for survival. Their mixed DNA could have introduced immune adaptations, unique metabolisms, or cognitive variations that allowed early humans to thrive in climates once thought uninhabitable. In this light, extinction becomes less an end and more an absorption, a merging of lineages into something new. But what of the hybrids themselves? The beings who lived between worlds, neither one species nor the other. They must have walked among both, carrying faces that blended the familiar with the strange. Did they belong anywhere? Did they have a language, a culture, an identity of their own? No fossils tell us. Yet fragments of bone and tooth show subtle transitions. Brow ridges softening, skull shapes smoothing, jaws balancing between the ancient and the modern. These physical bridges may have been the bodies of those who joined lineages destined to become us. Anthropologists have found hints of this in distant corners of the world. Bones that don't quite match known types, skulls with features that seem borrowed from multiple species. For years, such remains were catalogued as anomalies, evolutionary dead ends. Now, they appear less like mistakes, and more like evidence of a continuous dialogue between the many kinds of humanity that once shared this planet. Perhaps that is the true story of evolution, not a ladder, but a chorus. Each species a voice, each hybrid a harmony, blending into the melody we now call human. Those lost hominins may be gone, but their music remains, carried in the quiet rhythms of our DNA. And if we listen carefully, we might still hear them, the forgotten hybrids, the living bridges who connected what was with what would be. They are gone from the world, yet never fully gone from us. Long before telescopes traced the outlines of distant galaxies, ancient people looked up at the night sky and felt a quiet certainty that life and light were connected. Heavens, they believed, were not empty, but alive, the birthplace of everything that breathed. Thousands of years later, modern science has begun to circle back to that idea, dressed now in the language of biology and physics. It is called panspermia, the theory that the seeds of life did not begin on Earth at all, but came from the stars. At its core, the idea is simple yet profound. Life's building blocks, amino acids, sugars, nucleotides, are found everywhere in the cosmos. They cling to comets, drift through nebulae, and fall to planets on the dust of meteorites. In laboratories, scientists have recreated the conditions of space and found that these molecules can endure the cold and radiation of interstellar travel. Some meteorites discovered on Earth even carry complex organic compounds, their carbon signatures older than the planet itself. To those who study them, it's as if the universe scattered the ingredients of life like pollen, waiting for fertile worlds to catch them. If panspermia is true, then life on Earth is not an isolated miracle, but part of a much larger story, one that began billions of years ago among the stars. The question then becomes, did those seeds arrive only once, in the planet's beginning, or have they continued to arrive, carried by comets and cosmic dust throughout the ages? Some researchers quietly speculate that new infusions of organic material could still be shaping evolution today, subtly merging alien chemistry with our own. And here, the mystery deepens. When the unknown sequences were discovered in 2025, those fragments that matched no earthly species, a few voices wondered aloud whether their origin might be more than terrestrial. The idea was never published, never spoken in official settings. Yet it lingers in private discussions. Could some of the genetic material that defines us have come not from another species on Earth, but from life that arrived here long ago, from somewhere else entirely? It's a hypothesis too delicate for certainty, but it fits within nature's logic. Evolution, after all, is not confined to one planet. It is a cosmic process, written into the chemistry of existence. If the universe is vast and old enough to create countless worlds, then perhaps life itself is its language, one that writes, erases, and rewrites across light years. When we gaze at the stars, we are looking at our own possible origins. The atoms in our bodies were forged in ancient suns. The carbon in our cells once drifted between worlds. Whether or not the unknown DNA fragments are truly cosmic, the principle remains. We are children of the universe, carrying in our veins the dust of exploding stars and, perhaps, the memory of lives that began far beyond the reach of Earth's horizon. And as we sleep beneath that same ancient sky, maybe the universe still speaks, softly through us, reminding its wandering children that they have never truly been alone. It is one of the oldest and most unsettling ideas whispered through both science and myth, that humanity did not simply evolve, but was helped. Across ancient cultures, from the Sumerians to the Maya, stories describe gods or sky beings who fashioned early humans, teaching them how to speak, to farm, to build. For centuries, these were dismissed as metaphors for knowledge and creation. But when genetic research revealed evidence of deliberate interbreeding, the exchange of DNA across species, the selective survival of certain traits, a quiet question began to surface once again. Could some part of that myth be memory? The Sumerians told of the Anunnaki, beings who mixed the essence of life to create humankind as helpers and stewards of the earth. In ancient Egypt, Thoth was said to have measured the flesh and the spirit, shaping balance between divine and mortal. The Mayan Popol Vuh describes creators forming humanity from maize and the breath of the stars. Each myth, in its own language, speaks of life designed with precision, of creation as an act of knowledge rather than chance. Modern geneticists, of course, use different words. They speak of gene flow, hybridization, selective pressure. Yet beneath the technical phrasing lies a similar theme. Life adapting through guidance, through encounters that seem improbably aligned with survival. The discovery of the 2025 anomaly, DNA sequences that seem placed with purpose, repeating in patterns too consistent to be random, brought these parallels into sharper focus. Some researchers quietly wondered whether early humans had been subject to a kind of natural engineering, guided not by conscious hands, but by the deep intelligence of evolution itself, or, as myth might call it, the wisdom of the gods. Consider the strange efficiency of the human brain, an organ far more complex than required for survival alone, or the sudden leaps in cultural and cognitive ability that appear in the archaeological record as if from nowhere. Symbolic art, fire mastery, music, language. Were these simply the product of gradual mutation, or evidence of a selective acceleration, the hand of something that knew how to rewrite life's code from within? Science offers no proof, only patterns. Yet those patterns echo what our oldest stories already told. Some scholars argue that the myths of divine creation may preserve, in poetic form, the memory of real evolutionary thresholds, times when contact between different human species changed us irreversibly. Others take the idea further, imagining knowledge lost to time, civilizations that understood heredity long before we gave it a name. The truth may lie somewhere between science and legend, in the recognition that evolution is not blind chaos, but a conversation, one that life conducts with itself across the ages. Whether guided by gods, nature, or something deeper still, the result is the same. We are the synthesis of many worlds, a living archive of design, accident, and mystery intertwined. And perhaps, as the myths suggest, the experiment never truly ended. Perhaps the architects, whether divine or natural, still watch, content to let their creation wander where it truly came from. Every discovery, no matter how astonishing, eventually narrows to a single human question. Who were they? The numbers, the charts, the gene sequences, all fade beside that simple mystery. We know their fragments now. We can see their code woven through ours, recognize their presence in the architecture of our bones, our blood, our minds. But the faces behind that code remain invisible, erased by time itself. Still, we can imagine them, and perhaps, in doing so, remember them. Were they like us? Did they look into the sky and wonder what waited beyond the stars? Did they bury their dead, sing to their children, dream as we dream? Or were they something slightly apart, close enough to meet us, but far enough to seem otherworldly? The scientists who first uncovered the anomaly spoke of elegance in their genome, efficiency in their design. But evolution is not elegant by nature. It is practical. If their DNA appears refined, what does that mean? Were they stronger, wiser, or simply adapted to a world we no longer know? The fossils remain silent, but their code whispers possibility. The unknown lineage may have walked alongside early humans, teaching survival through example. Their differences blurred by interbreeding until the line between them and us dissolved. Or perhaps they lived in isolation, deep in forests or valleys, now swallowed by time, watching from afar as their cousins multiplied. Some theories suggest they may have vanished, not through violence, but through compassion, merging into us willingly, their uniqueness absorbed into a greater whole. The myths call them gods. The legends call them teachers. The data calls them unclassified variants. But beneath the words lies the same truth. They were part of us, and we are part of them. The human genome is not a monument to a single species, but a chorus of lives that once shared the same breath. Every cell is an archive, every heartbeat a faint remembrance of hands we will never see. And if we ask who they were, we must also ask why they left. Did they perish in silence, their world ending as ours began? Or did they choose disappearance, stepping back when their task was done, leaving the next generation to carry their spark forward? There is a strange comfort in the thought that extinction and creation may not be opposites, but partners in an eternal rhythm. For now, the question remains unanswered. The scientists still search the soil, the code, the stars. But perhaps the answer is already here, pulsing quietly within us. When we dream, when we love, when we reach beyond ourselves, maybe we are echoing the instincts of those who shaped us, the unknown species, the third ancestor, the forgotten ones. They do not need names to exist. They live through us, in every breath, every heartbeat, every act of wonder. And so the question lingers, gentle as dusk. Who were they? And more haunting still, how much of them is still awake within us? For all the complexity of our origins, the branching, blending, and quiet disappearances, one truth endures. We are one species. Every person alive today, from every nation and language, carries nearly the same genetic script. Out of billions of letters in the genome, less than 0.1% differs between any two people. Beneath the surface of skin, accent, or belief, we are variations of the same ancient song. That sameness is not a limitation. It is the proof of our shared beginning. Scientists call it the genetic bottleneck, a point roughly 200,000 years ago, when humanity's numbers dwindled to a few thousand. From that small, fragile population, the entire modern world would one day unfold. Every culture, every art, every thought can trace its ancestry to those few survivors who carried life forward through fire and ice. Within their DNA lay echoes of many others, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, the unnamed ancestors whose fragments still hum in our blood. Their merging did not divide us, it united us. Each of them contributed a single thread to the vast tapestry of humankind. When the 2025 Genome Project revealed the traces of an unknown species in our DNA, it did not make us less human. It made us more. It reminded us that we are not separate stories, but a single narrative told through countless voices. Even the smallest fragment of DNA, unchanged for 1 million years, serves as a bridge, linking us backward to creatures that once walked the same earth, breathed the same air, gazed at the same stars. Their strength flows through our immune systems. Their curiosity fuels our minds. To be human is to carry memory, both conscious and cellular, the living archive of every survival and adaptation that brought us here. And it is not only ancient life we share. Every modern person is related to every other by fewer degrees than we imagine. Two strangers on opposite sides of the planet might share an ancestor only a few thousand years ago, an eye blink in geological time. The web of connection is so dense that humanity functions as one great organism, endlessly recombining, endlessly remembering itself. Perhaps that is what evolution was always moving toward. Not separation, but reunion. Not the triumph of one lineage over another, but the blending of all into something new. A species capable of remembering that it is many. When you close your eyes tonight, your body hums with the energy of millions who came before you. Every breath carries atoms once breathed by ancestors and strangers alike. You are not apart from them. You are their continuation, their final verse, still being sung. In that realization, the great puzzle of identity softens. We are not the product of isolation, but of communion. The story of life, written in our cells, does not end with us. It merely pauses, waiting for the next voice to continue the song. If the story of evolution has one constant refrain, it is this: life endures through variation. From the smallest microbe to the tallest tree, Strength lies not in sameness, but in difference. Humanity is no exception. Every small deviation, a different skin tone, a unique gene, a new idea, adds resilience to the species as a whole. It is the variety within us that ensures our survival, and it may be the reason we are still here, when so many of our cousins are not. When scientists examine the human genome, they find that diversity is our greatest inheritance. The blending of countless lineages, African, Eurasian, Neanderthal, Denisovan, and perhaps even the unknown lineage uncovered in 2025, has given us more than identity. It has given us immunity. Studies show that hybrid populations are often stronger, better able to adapt to new environments, more resistant to disease. What once might have been seen as impurity was, in truth, evolution's finest masterpiece, the merging of strength across difference. In every generation, new combinations arise, billions of subtle changes, each one an experiment in possibility. Some fade, others endure, and together they create a species capable of surviving deserts, mountains, and endless cold. That flexibility comes not from perfection, but from diversity. We are, by design, a collaboration written into code. Even at the cultural level, the same principle holds. Civilizations that embraced diversity of knowledge, of language, of belief, flourished. When the ancient Greeks learned from Egypt, when the Silk Road carried ideas from India to China, when scholars in Baghdad translated the wisdom of every culture into one universal library, humanity advanced. Progress was never born in isolation. It was born in conversation. The lesson extends beyond history or genetics. Every cell in our body is a chorus of cooperation. Our mitochondria, ancient remnants of bacteria that fused with early cells, are proof that partnership is not weakness, but evolution's most brilliant invention. We are built, quite literally, from alliances. So when we speak of human differences, what we are really describing are the countless solutions evolution has offered to the same question: how can life endure? Each answer is unique, yet all are valid. The variety in our genes, our faces, our thoughts, these are not divisions. They are defenses, woven by nature itself. The discovery of unknown DNA within us does not fragment humanity. It reinforces our unity. It tells us that even in prehistory, survival depended on coming together, on merging strengths to create something new. And that pattern continues now, in ways both visible and unseen. The world's diversity, genetic, cultural, emotional, is not the obstacle to human survival. It is the proof of it. When we finally understand that, the boundaries between them and us, ancient or modern, begin to fade. We are many strands, but one weave, and the strength of that weave, the music of difference held in harmony, is what will carry humanity forward, just as it has carried us from the beginning. For generations, humanity told itself a simple story, that we were singular, a species apart, chosen by evolution or chance to stand above all others. It was a comforting belief, clean and clear. But the deeper we looked into our DNA, the more that story began to blur. The discoveries of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and finally the unknown lineage revealed in 2025 have shown us that we were never truly alone. We are the children of many ancestors, the heirs of shared worlds. And in that realization lies a quiet kind of humility. It is humbling to know that our greatness did not begin with us. The creativity in our minds, the strength in our bones, the fire of survival that burns in our blood, all of it was built upon foundations laid by others. Some we know by name, most we never will. Their bones turned to dust before our stories began, yet they are present in every breath we take. We walk through a world they shaped, though their footprints have long since faded. When scientists speak of archaic admixture, it sounds clinical, the merging of distinct species through interbreeding. But beneath that phrase is something profoundly human: connection. It means that when two different beings met, perhaps around a fire or under a strange sky, they did not always fight. Sometimes they chose to share, to live together, to create life together. That act, repeated across millennia, gave rise to us. The entire human race is the result of countless moments of recognition, one pair of eyes meeting another and finding not difference, but kinship. It is also humbling to realize how fragile we are. The fossil record is a gallery of extinction, dozens of human species, each with hopes written in their genes, each gone. Homo floresiensis, Homo naledi, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, all vanished, their songs ended. And yet, somehow, against all odds, a fragment of them endures in us. We are not their replacements. We are their continuation. Perhaps that is the lesson written quietly in our DNA, that survival does not belong to the strongest or even the smartest, but to those willing to connect. The human story is not a tale of domination, but of inheritance. We carry forward what others began. Their resilience lives on in our cells. Their instincts guide our hands. Their memory hums in the electric silence between thoughts. When we finally accept that we were never alone, the idea of superiority falls away. What remains is gratitude, a sense of belonging to something vast and ancient, a family whose members stretch beyond the boundaries of time. We are threads in a tapestry that began long before us and will continue long after we are gone. To be human, then, is to be part of a chorus, not the first voice and not the last, but one note in the great song of life, still echoing softly through the ages. The discovery of the unknown DNA in 2025 began as a scientific puzzle, a handful of mismatched sequences, nothing more. But as researchers dug deeper, the data began to resemble a mirror, one that reflected not only our biology, but our nature. Those fragments, ancient and unclassified, became teachers of a different kind. They reminded us that the greatest lessons in life often come from what cannot be fully explained. The first lesson is humility. For all our technology and knowledge, we are still beginners in understanding ourselves. Every time we believe the human story is complete, a new fragment emerges, proving that the universe still holds its secrets close. The unknown lineage humbles science by reminding it that truth is vast, and we have explored only its surface. It humbles us as individuals too, reminding each of us that we are not self-made, but shaped by countless lives that came before, most of which we will never know by name. The second lesson is unity. That faint genetic whisper shared across continents shows that our divisions, race, nationality, belief, are surface illusions. Beneath them, we are built from the same ancient code, written by the same ancestral hands. Even our differences exist within the same framework of shared humanity. The unknown DNA doesn't separate us, it binds us more tightly together, proving that we are all chapters of one long unfinished book. The third lesson is memory. Our cells do not forget. They carry within them every success and failure of life before us, the courage of survival, the pain of extinction, the miracle of adaptation. When we look at our reflection, we see only the present generation, but within that reflection stands a crowd, millions of ancestors, visible only in the quiet mathematics of the genome. They have never left us, they simply became us. And perhaps the final lesson is wonder. Science often seeks certainty, but life thrives in mystery. The existence of an unknown lineage, one that defies every fossil record, invites us to embrace the unknown, not with fear, but with curiosity. It reminds us that mystery is not the absence of knowledge, it is the promise of discovery. Somewhere in those silent strands of DNA lies a story still waiting to be told. Maybe we will never know what they looked like or how they lived, but in another sense, we already do, because their legacy speaks through us. Every time we love, build, or dream, we continue their unfinished work. We are their echo, their proof that existence endures. The lesson, then, is simple but eternal. Life remembers, and as long as it remembers, nothing is truly lost. The unknown within us is not a void to be solved, but a connection to be honored, a quiet reminder that the past is not behind us, but alive within every heartbeat. The night is quiet now. The world outside slows, and the hum of thought softens into stillness. Somewhere beneath the noise of the present, beneath the constant motion of life, there is another rhythm, older, slower, patient as breath. It is the sound of memory moving through blood, of ancestry humming faintly in every cell. The body you inhabit is not yours alone. It is the meeting place of 1,000 generations. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that long procession. Behind you stretches an endless line, mothers and fathers, strangers and tribes, the known and the forgotten, all walking slowly through time. Some carried fire, some carried song, some carried nothing but hope. They survived cold, hunger, and change so that you could sit here now, in this moment, breathing the same air they once breathed. They are gone, but not lost. Their essence flows in your veins, written into the quiet code that makes you who you are. Scientists call it inheritance, the passing of DNA. But there is a poetry to it, too, something deeper than the chemical bonds that hold life together. Within every cell is a memory of light and darkness, of loss and endurance, of beginnings and continuations. Our genes do not merely instruct the body, they tell its story. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it, the whisper of the ancestors, gentle as wind through leaves. They do not speak in words. Their language is rhythm, the pulse in your wrist, the steady beat of your heart, the rise and fall of your breath. Each one is an echo of theirs. Every heartbeat you feel tonight is not just your own, but the collective heartbeat of all who came before, the Neanderthals and Denisovans, the third ancestor, the unknown lineage that slipped quietly into our blood, and the countless humans who followed. They have not vanished. They simply changed shape, merging into the river of life that flows through you. And so, when you feel small beneath the stars, remember, those stars made your atoms. When you feel alone in time, remember, your body is built from memories billions of years old. You are not separate from the past. You are the past, awakened into this present moment, a spark of consciousness, carrying the light of ages forward. Let that thought be your rest. The mystery of life is not meant to be solved, only felt. A quiet awe at how something so fragile could endure for so long. As sleep begins to gather around you, let the questions fade. Let the noise of the day fall away. In the silence, you might hear it, faint but unmistakable, the sound of your ancestors breathing within you, whispering the oldest truth there is. You were never alone. You never will be. You are the continuation of everything that has ever been, and the beginning of everything that is yet to come.